So good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm Ann Lopes, and I am the interim provost here at John Jay. Can you hear this delay? At any rate, I'm the interim provost, and I'm here on behalf of President Mason to introduce our distinguished panel that's here to engage in a conversation with each other and with you. Our featured speaker and guest is Commissioner Anna M. Bermudez. She's a graduate of Brown University and Yale Law School. Commissioner Bermudez is the New York City Department of Probation's first Latina and second woman to be appointed commissioner. She is leading the department in its mission to enhance public safety through appropriate and individualized intervention in the lives of Department of Probation clients to enable them to permanently exit the justice system. So we are very proud and excited to have her with her mission in mind. For over 20 years, Commissioner Bermudez has tirelessly advocated for children and teenagers involved in the justice system. She worked in the Children's Aid Society, the Center for Alternative Sentencing and Employment Services, the Legal Aid Society, and was involved with the Restorative Justice Initiative, Office of Children and Family Services Advisory Board, and the New York City Dispositional Reform Steering Committee. She successfully led citywide initiatives that focused on improving outcomes for court-involved youth through interdisciplinary collaborations. We're really delighted to have her with us. Our other two panelists, discussants, because this will really be a conversation among the group and with the audience, are from our faculty. Dr. Maria J. D'Agostino, Chair and Associate Professor in the Department of Public Management, is a member of the United Nations roster of experts in gender inequality and women's empowerment in public administration. Dr. D'Agostino is co-founder of Women in the Public Sector at John Jay and recipient of the Faculty Mid-Career Research Award of the section of Women in Public Policy Administration, Rita Mae Kelly Distinguished Research Award. Dr. D'Agostino. Dr. Nicole M. Elias. Dr. Elias is in the Department of Public Management at John Jay. She's co-founder of the Women in the Public Sector program, faculty partner of the Prisoner Reentry Institute, and a research fellow at the Defense Equal Opportunity Management Institute. She is co-editor of a symposium on the future of women in public administration, appearing in Administration and Society. Her research addresses diversity and representation in governance with a particular focus on sex, gender orientation, and identity. She is the author of numerous journal articles, book chapters, government reports, and practitioner training modules. Her recent work appears in Public Administration Quarterly and public integrity. We have an august group here for you this evening. Please join me in welcoming them.
Hello? Okay. Thank you, Provost Lobes, for the introduction. I do want to repeat, we are delighted to have you here today. We have been... You can hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay. See. Mine doesn't echo, though. So, we've been trying to get the commissioner here for over a year. So we were thrilled that this finally worked out, and you're here with us. So, Provost Lobes provided a wonderful introduction, but if you could tell us a little bit more about yourself and specifically from your perspective, can you hear me? From your perspective, what you believe contributed to your professional success.
So before going there, something struck me when I was being introduced, because one of the things that I strive for as a leader and as a person, you know, in every job I've ever had and whatever, is to be authentic and to be really true to myself. And something is missing from that biography, and yeah, all the first and whatever, but I'm also the first openly lesbian leader in this department, and that's missing from there. And it goes to something I'll talk about later, which you as students might be familiar with, which is the whole issue of intersectionality and how you really can't check. You're more than the sum of your parts in a way, but the way they play into various fields and various relationships can create a whole landmine that you have to be really aware of. And sometimes creates doubt because you don't know where the pressure point, like which part of you is the pressure point at that moment, right? So I'm going to table that for a second because I'm going to return to it and try to answer your question. So in terms of things that have contributed to my professional success, first and foremost, I think it's my mother, you know, frankly, because now as a parent, I am even more in awe of this, because even though I've tried to instill this belief in my children, it hasn't, I don't see it having taken hold the way it took hold on me. So I don't know, she did something. I mean, she was something about like really creating in me an understanding or a belief that I could do whatever I wanted to do with my life. That I had the brains, that I had the whatever it took, it was there. And she fostered that in both my parents, but my mother mostly, you know, that belief. And just a series of principles about life that have just continued and stayed with me and have guided me throughout, some of which are the following. So, you're no better than anybody else, okay? You learn from everybody you meet. You need to learn for the rest of your life. You never stop learning. Things like that, you know, that now seem like sayings, but somehow that sort of became who I was. And then I tried to apply that in everything I did. Things that have been important for me have been really that I ended up guiding my career, if you will, if I can even say I guided it, because even, you know, since we're in John Jay, criminal justice, a lot of the people that we work with say, I was at the wrong place at the wrong time. I've been blessed being at the right place at the right time a lot. Not to mention having great mentors, one of whom is here in the back, who's your general counsel, Marjorie Singer. I owe a lot to her. And so always having champions, you know, for you, who hold you to high standards, because she never let me slide, for real. And so these principles are really important to use to make the decisions that you're going to have to make in deciding which way to take your career, or to what jobs to take, what things to pursue. Another piece is really knowing who you are yourself. What are your passions? What are, some people may know that they want to lead, who may want to be leaders. Others are not so sure, and that's fine. It's better to know yourself than try to do something that you're not ultimately really comfortable with, or it's not something that drives you. So for me, the relationship of leadership to other things that I developed as a young person was that I loved to teach, and I loved to learn. I loved to coach. And to me, that's the essence of leadership. Because as a leader, you're essentially responsible for the growth of the people that you're working with, right? And so you need to be able to teach. You need to be able to learn from others, to be able to engage people in the work that you're doing, because you can never do this alone, any of it, no matter what position you have, no matter what path you take. And so I thought, so I became a lawyer. I was a lawyer. And I loved, some parts of being a lawyer. I loved studying law, and I ended up liking a lot of things that I never thought I was going to like statutory interpretation, things like that. I loved trial work, because trial work, you became a mini expert on the thing that you were trying, especially for some of the summer jobs that I did general litigation, and so a malpractice case, you became mini doctor. If you had a negligence case, you had to become like a products liability, expert, et cetera, et cetera. So that was kind of fun, but ended up hating being in the courtroom, even though it was thrilling, and I work off of a lot of adrenaline, and so it was just that the system was trying to always, especially in juvenile justice, which is what I did most, to a truth that was kind of not findable, because human interactions, when they come into court, are very gray, and the system is trying to find an absolute. And so I became disenchanted with that and decided to go. That's when I went to work at Cases, and started working on creating programs for young people, because to me, the involvement in the justice system was a teachable moment, and the best thing we could do for young people involved in the system was to have them learn from it and never do it again, right? And never, from much more of a growth perspective, like I've said. Let me see. For women in particular, learning to project confidence. So somehow I was blessed with that without trying a lot, although then it became I was abrasive because I was the dykey person. No, because I was gender non-conforming in some ways too. I walked in a room between my Puerto Rican tornado and the other aspects of me, then that could become a challenge or a barrier for other people. Like, how are they going to take me or whatever? But the other thing, I don't know if it was my mother who introduced me to this quote, but I spent a part of my young adulthood collecting quotes, and looking for quotes. So there's an Eleanor Roosevelt quote that I absolutely love, which says that no one can make you feel inferior without your consent, okay? So don't let anybody make you feel inferior. You have what it takes to know what you're doing, to learn if you don't know, right? And there's no need for that to be happening to us, right? So I think that's a very important thing. The fact that I have kind of what I call two sides to my brain has helped me. So I have a side of my brain that is very geeky and focused on theory, and then another one that's very practical, that's very hands-on to do, right? And so to me, the best actions are always informed by theory. And so I always make it my business to know both sides of things, of how they work and why they work the way they do or they're supposed to work. So that way, in the position I have right now, it's a great blend because there's the policy issues, right? And then there's system reforms, the macro level stuff, and then there's all the how do we do the work of probation. And so it's very interesting, and so it's been manifested in my org chart in the sense that most commissioners have a chief of staff, and that's kind of like the person who makes things happen, and you know, people do things, and so instead I have two advisors, one a senior policy advisor and one an advisor for agency practices, right? And the policy advisor is somebody who I hired from not within the Department of Probation, and the practices advisor is somebody who we promoted from within. And they work together to form my one brain. So, you know, and so it's a really, it can be confusing sometimes. It confuses people because people in the rank and file want to know like who they go to and who's in charge, if not me. I'm like, you gotta figure it out, right? So living in the gray, I guess, is also, you know, something that I've learned to do over the years and has actually worked for me. It doesn't work for everybody, okay? But lastly, back to the many aspects of myself, one of the things that cannot be ignored is that I have been the beneficiary of white privilege. As a Puerto Rican, even as a lesbian, the fact that I have light skin opens the door a lot, okay? I don't change the optics of diversity in places that are looking for diversity, all right? And I could feel bad about that, but I don't feel bad about that at all, because that gives me the in to put my imprint and bring what I need to bring to the place, the culture of the place, and I know I bring that with me no matter what I look like. But it is often the opening of the door, all right? Sometimes that privilege ends where my gayness begins or when my Puerto Ricanness begins, right? And then all of a sudden there's a different story or there's a different approach to me. But it's something that needs to, you know, that I need to acknowledge, that I need to recognize in sort of the trajectory that I've faced. So let me stop there. Since I'm like now.
So there is so much that we could follow up on, and I'm sure we'll have many questions from the commissioner's opening statement. But one of the things that really struck me, aside from how much you really developed as a result of your mother's guiding principles and advice, is I'd love to hear a story or a moment in your career or professional life in which really stands out to you and you were able to take that moment and either use it as a learning experience or as a teaching experience for others in your leadership capacity.
So when I think of, well, it was my first experience trying to do wholesale change in an organization. And this actually happened at Cases. I don't know if it happened while you were there, Marjorie. I think it may have been before. So it's funny, at Cases I had some of the greatest highs of my career and some of the greatest lows of my career. I was there for 10 years, so the span allows for that. So what was happening, we were trying to change the culture of the case managers to be more youth development oriented. And we, sort of the leadership, we came up with a blueprint of what we were gonna do. We decided like there were gonna be different groups, all this stuff. Like we put in a lot of work. We studied it, we studied youth development, we hired a consultant, all that stuff. And we never took the time to really engage with each other as the leadership, to really assess who was really on board and who wasn't, right? And so it turned out that an integral person in getting this done was not on board, right? And on top of that, we all of us had not really engaged the staff enough in the planning process of getting this wholesale change. And I won't even tell you what excruciating process this was to try to get this done, and to, you know, and how misguided we were in a couple of things. And, you know, it was a mini disaster, right? But we took the time to, you know, at least I took the depth to what was the feedback and all of that? What did we learn from all of that? And so I think I took, you know, sort of some things from it of, you always have to discuss and really let people be able to say, I'm not good with that, you know, right now. And really take the time to process. Processing is almost as important as the result, whether you get the result or not. Because even if you don't get the result, you can regroup easier and more effectively if you have that piece already in place of the players. And also the other piece was like, never do anything from management without involving the staff who's going to be affected by it. And people say, well, they shouldn't know, because what if it doesn't matter. They're going to know, because the rumors go around everywhere. If you think you ever as a leader are doing something that people don't know you're doing, you're sadly mistaken. Because I can't even, sometimes they're totally wrong. But somebody's close enough to what's going on, or that there's going to be a change, or that there's going to be, you know, and so it's, you know, it's better to be transparent than to think that you're coming up with this great idea that everybody's going to embrace, and they may, but if you don't engage the staff, it's just not going to happen. Is that the kind of story you were?
That's a great story. I think sometimes organizational learning takes place when challenges arise more so than the successes. So I think that's a really telling example, especially for our future public administrators.
And here's here's a smaller example, but this is where I learned to, one, not take things personally, and two, really always start where's the feedback in that? You know, when I'm starting to get rattled. So there was so I had an opportunity to promote someone at one point, and I wrote this fabulous email about the person, and so excited, we're promoting from within, not hiring from without, you know, send out the email, and within half an hour, I was starting to hear, not directly, but people were upset at my email. Because the way I wrote the email implied that other people were not doing their job, or were not good at their job. And I'm like, are you kidding? This person is so fantastic. All I'm doing is praising this person. This is not about everybody else. So I had to think, I was like, okay, I either can say, okay, you all are crazy, and I'm not going to deal with it, or where's the feedback in that? So what do you think the feedback was from that? You can just shout it. Anybody? Exactly. Nice. You're gonna be up in charge of something soon. Exactly. So then I had to start talking to people. I said, what's going on? And it was exactly that. So then we put in some ways in which we could routinely celebrate each other, that, you know, you can do all kinds of stuff without costing money or having be a new initiative or whatever. And so we were able to develop more of a, you know, of a cohesion in that particular team.
Thanks. So you could say there's this ups and downs in being a leader. You defined yourself before as an authentic leader, and I sort of want to bring it back there. And so what does that mean for you? And how do you can you become an authentic leader?
Yeah, I mean, I initially used the word to mean like I needed to be myself. I couldn't pretend to be something I'm not, right? And what does that mean? What it means is, okay, I was going to say I'm loud, you know, and that is part of it. But to be able to speak my mind and to be able to be true to those principles, you know, and authentic to me also means that you you never forget that everybody you're working with is a person that is complex, that is not, is not defined by any particular aspect of themselves, that you really need to get to know people to work with people and to get work done, right? And so, yeah, I think it's honoring all parts of myself, and not hiding pieces of me just because, sometimes you kind of strategically may need to do that, but ultimately to make sure you have the space and the relationships in the workplace that allow you to honor all parts of yourself.
Oh, sorry. So then, how do you do that? So I guess to Nicole's point, if you could provide a story that would illustrate your authentic leadership style, and maybe you're in the workplace.
Maybe we need to ask somebody who works for me, but what? Yes. Kate Spalding, who's here with me, she works with me. She says that I dance at the holiday parties all the time. Yes, I get all the staff to dance. I guess it's not being afraid to be embarrassed. Like not embarrassed, but like, yeah, somebody could make fun of what I'm doing, but this is who I am. Take it or leave it. And really draw out, the people around you, I guess, and yeah, I guess that's.
When I think about leadership, I really feel like the critical element there is trust. Like you said, not being afraid to be embarrassed, but it's almost like when you make friends, you have to pretend you're friends before you're friends to actually become friends, right? Or you're never going to be friends. So you have to put your trust in others in order to build that rapport and create that leadership from within. So that's how I think of leadership, and it sounds like your authentic self really brings that to your organization.
Yeah, I mean, for me, as I developed as a leader, I also, back to my two brains, I read a lot about leadership to just see what was considered, effective and, something that would be encouraged, things that would be encouraged in a leader, and then grabbed from the various things that I would read to, things that seemed to fit with me rather than just pick something and be that way, right? And so I think I grabbed onto a variety of approaches, but ultimately it's also, the ability to admit maybe I don't know the answer to that. Mm-hmm. Like I need people's input. Mm-hmm. And that's very hard. It's very hard, especially when you get to a level where you've been doing the work for a while, or you've been in the business for a long time, or in the profession for a long time, and you also, for me, but the challenges that I have is I take on too much, and then before you know it, I'm like, why am I doing all this? Other people can help me. Other people can do things, and it's not because I think like I would do it better. But it's just like there can be so much that comes at you all the time that you start forgetting that you have other people that can work with you and help you with something, right? And so delegating is hard for me anyway, just because I don't also want to bother people. But then people do it to me, and then I get annoyed. Like, don't think that you can't do that because I'm busy. But so that whole being able to really check in with yourself and others as to how we're going to get the work done together, is big. And also in terms of the trust piece, being able, like I said, being able to admit when you either didn't know something or, you know what, that didn't go so well, did it? Let's regroup, let's figure it out. Making sure that you notice when somebody's not quite comfortable with something and go to them and say, hey, what's going on? What are your thoughts about that? I thought you held back today in a meeting. No, I don't want to say anything because, I get in trouble. You're not going to, there's that word, I hate that expression. Get in trouble, what does that mean? How would you get in trouble if you're thinking, if you're having ideas, if you're having concerns about something, right? So being able to hear, not just to hear, but to listen and be able to then problem solve. And sometimes you're gonna say, you know what, we're gonna disagree, I need you to go with me on this. But I think that when we've taken the time to really work through that, that can happen easier than not.
So one of the things that you raised in your initial set of comments was your sexual orientation. And I'm dying to ask this question. This is selfishly my own area of research. I do a lot on gender nonconforming as well as transgender workplace policy and transitions. So for our future leaders in organizations, for our future public servants, can you speak a little bit to the importance of identity in the workplace and also how new forms of identity are really creating new challenges and opportunity for us in the public sector?
Let's just say we have a lot of work to do there, okay? And the irony, or the, I don't know what to call it, of a position like mine is that based on some equal employment opportunity issues, I cannot do certain things that would be seen as favoring one group or another, right? So I can't even host a little gathering for our LGBTQ employees. Not that there's many that are out, that's the other piece. So my work is really to create the work environment right now where people are comfortable being out. Lots of work to do there because our industry is very law enforcement-y, it's easier for women to be out than for men, right? Because the gender non-conforming piece, everybody, oh yeah, a cop who's a woman who looks like she's gay, like she's a lesbian, that somehow becomes conforming in a weird way. But then it's not really, right? But people leave it alone, if you will, more than not. But people are afraid to talk about their personal relationships sometimes. You know, they don't feel safe, right? In an agency of 1,000 employees, it can be hard to then create that culture change. We're moving at it slowly but surely. When I came on, we didn't even have an LGBTQ policy about how we were going to work with clients. So, you know, we're doing a lot of work with how we work with transgender and gender nonconforming clients, as well as some with our staff, but not as much as I would like to. And, you know, the challenges that we face in working with transgender probation clients, gender nonconforming, and other gender nonconforming folks is an issue of resources. Less so, I mean, I found our staff to have done a great job in working with them, but a lot of times you know, it's just a constellation of issues, family support, you know, resources, and so right now, our biggest approach is to develop that transformational relationship between the client and the probation officer. And by and large, I believe, and I don't have statistics on this, our staff are engaging really well. I mean, I don't know, what would you say?
I'd love to ask more follow-ups, but I think that we should really turn it over to the students and give them opportunity to ask some great questions from this initial set of rich comments from the commissioner.
There should be a mic going around.
Hi, so this is the first question, and then I'll pass the mic around. But what would you say to young women and LGBTQ folks who may be wanting to follow in your footsteps and enter this field, but they're worried that they're going to face sexism or homophobia?
So you're going to face that wherever you go, okay? So it's, I think it's a matter of finding a support network, ideally. I mean, sometimes you won't know that as you're entering the job, but once you get the job, right, as you're entering this field, is looking for people who will be supportive and somewhat of a community. Get the lay of the land of what is the what, because no matter what industry you're in, what people say when they're offering you the job, oh, this is a great environment for people to work in and whatever, the reality is often different. Make sure you have mentors, people that can advise you, and that's something that, I take very seriously. So whatever you guys need, whoever needs it, I'm happy to be available to you. So that you can, process stuff that may be happening. But ultimately be true to yourself. Don't hide yourself. Don't pretend to be something you're not. And if those people can't take it, move on. Move on. There's other places that you can make a difference. So.
Commissioner, looking ahead to Mayor de Blasio's second term, what probation reforms are you going to try to get implemented?
Great. So we have, I don't know if you're familiar with the recent legislation of raise the age, right? So now in New York State, right now, if you're 16 years old, you're automatically treated as an adult in matters of criminal justice. Starting next year, 16-year-olds and then 17-year-olds the following year, all of them who are arrested for misdemeanors will be treated as juveniles through family court. And then there's like a whole complicated thing on felonies and so on and so forth. So that's going to be a huge initiative that we're going to be implementing. We have, right now we're involved in a big transformation, if you will, of the way we do our case management process, so that it's more strength-based, that it's infused with best practices in the field, motivational interviewing, stages of change, to really be focused on behavior change for people, and developing our community impact through our neighborhood opportunity networks, because now we're reaching into people who are not on probation, as well as people who are on probation who live in the communities that are, have the highest concentration of probation clients. Those are, three big initiatives. I would love to develop, and we're working on that. There's very little in the field around abusive partner interventions, domestic violence, for lack of a better word. From the offender perspective, okay, there's a lot of work that has been done in domestic violence on the survivor side of things, but not on the offender side of things. There are these programs out there that have no, quality assurance, and there's all sorts of issues. And within probation, it's a huge topic, because as crime has gone down, for example, in the NYCHA developments, the remaining crime is predominantly domestic violence. So we need to be able to figure something out to stop, that the revolving door and the recurring incidents that happen. So those are a few of the things that we'll be doing.
Commissioner, how do you separate the leader and the boss? How do you tactically separate both at your workplace?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Sometimes you kind of switch back and forth, So I would like to ask you a question back. What do you mean by boss?
Well, the boss, or at least like with my job, is just constantly writing people up, telling them what to do. From my understanding, my military experience teaches leadership is showing them, guiding them, showing them by example, helping them understand. And even if they didn't understand, keep helping them till they understand.
Right. So I think you can still have that boss outcomes through leadership, okay? In that, what's the reason you write somebody up? Because they didn't perhaps do what they were supposed to do. You can get people to do what they're supposed to do through coaching, through showing, through modeling, and all of that. And that's a much better way of being a boss. And even when you have to then bring somebody in, because something went wrong. I'm a huge both believer and absorbed, sort of what I would call a restorative approach, meaning that I don't believe in doing things to people or for people, but we do things with people. And we give people opportunities to fix what the problem is before you ever, discard it. You don't ever discard the person. You have the issue with the behavior, and part of it is to change that behavior. And sometimes it comes to a head, and it has to happen. I had the one surreal firing experience that I ever had was after a whole series that came at Children's Aid, after this person was constantly late. And the problem was that they were in charge of running some youth groups, and the youth, you can't be late. You just basically, and also people were saying, well, she always has some excuse, and there were family issues, and there were, which is fine, right? That can happen. It can't happen at the expense of being late, right? So the way we set it up was okay, so let's come up with a plan. If these are the things that are getting in the way, what's your plan on making sure they don't continue to happen? So we did this 2 or 3 times, never could find something that could work. And so at some point we said, look, this can't continue because your inability to, take care of this is getting in the way of the job performance. So this is no longer a good match. And she's like, you know what, you're right. I couldn't believe it. Because she had been given the opportunity to take care of it. If I had written her up and I had, said what was wrong with what she was doing and that she needed to fix something, it would be, if we ended up having to let her go, it would have been, a miserable experience. Not that being let go was fun for her, but she understood. It became a mutually understandable situation. So I always try to remember that experience in when people are starting to say, so-and-so's not working out. Well, hold on. Let's figure out what's happening and what are the ways in which we could try to fix this first. You just don't get rid of people like that. So I try to, when the boss thing starts pulling at me, I try to bring back the leadership to get that done.
Hi. For the past year, we see how easy it is for us to go backwards in this country. So I just want to know, what are some things you want to get done by the end of your term so we don't go backwards?
So that question had sort of daunted me for a little while, because almost every policy I write up or we do or whatever can be undone by somebody else. The one thing that nobody can take away is the skill level of the staff if you invest in that. And so that's what I'm focusing on, is staff development right now. I get invited to speak, great, I might or might not do it, but if it conflicts with a staff development initiative we're doing, I won't do it. I will always pick the staff development that's happening. Because the work that the staff does with the people on probation will remain no matter who's on the top, right? And if people can treat people on probation with humanity and dignity and respect, it doesn't matter if somebody says, you must file a violation at the first instance of misconduct, but if that officer's gonna then say, that's fine, but I'm gonna talk to my client about it and explain it and make sure they understand why this is happening and this is part of a policy and not because we're giving up on them, we're still golden. That person is still getting what they need in a way, not exactly from part of the system.
Good evening, everyone. So what piece of advice can you give to criminal justice advocates and public administrators who wish to follow your footsteps, such as in academics, networking, and professional skills?
So I would say, before getting into policy work or some parts of government, get experience working on the ground in whatever it is that you're interested in. Because getting that practical experience will inform better the policies you make. Sometimes policymakers who've never practiced in the area they're making policy can think of stuff that then when it hits the ground, people are like, wait, the logistics of that are not gonna work. You know, whereas if you've already done the work, you can anticipate that better and you can craft, to me, this is just my opinion, better legislation, policy, et cetera, because you'll know the inner workings. So that's what I would say, that to not necessarily go into policy right away after completing your degree, but to work on the ground first for some time. Does that answer your question?
Well, good evening, Commissioner. My question goes back to your, when you spoke about the 16 and 17-year-olds not being treated as adults anymore. Because I know we have a criminal justice system that's mainly based on punishment than rehabilitation. So when it comes to this law, does it stop there, or will there be like some sort of steps or some sort of process to rehabilitate these young people so they don't go back and behave that way?
So it depends on what they get as a sentence. If they come to me on probation, they get a bunch of good stuff. So because, like I said, so our theme of probation is that it should be a one-size-fits-one type of work, right? So the probation officer is required to get to know the person on probation, create a case plan for them that is all based on skills development and not just deficits. But skills development based on the interest of the person as well as their strengths, while being guided by our industries like risk needs assessments and that kind of stuff, because those are what tend to keep people in the system. But we want to approach it from that different perspective. We have a whole new sort of tagline that says find your new now once you're on probation, right? So use this as a stage of opportunity, as a place to grow, as a place to develop something for your future. So we're trying to be really future oriented, so that the person can see themselves outside of the system, and that goals are not just I want to complete probation, but no, I want to provide for my family. If you're an adult, if you're a young person, I want to have a career in something, right? So yes, our goal is to rehabilitate, is to create the behavior change that is needed. And we're very excited of having the 16 and 17-year-olds, because right now what happens is that even though they're treated as adults, some parts of that process are horrible, and nobody at that age should ever have to go through that. The flip side of that is that most of the cases get dismissed, or most of the cases they get this very low-level intervention, and because it's not a system that uses a lot of the best practices that we know, some kids who need it don't get the rehabilitation, and then they keep churning throughout. So hopefully this process now through family court and my juvenile unit will get at that better.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioner, and praises to you because you are a people person first, and then everything else comes second, and I think that's an excellent way to start. I have two questions that are pressing. What are we doing about the children that are in foster care, that age out, that end up in the criminal system? That's number one. The second question is, what are we doing about those batterers? Because they end up in another relationship with another person, and it's a vicious cycle.
So in terms of the youth who are aging out of foster care and end up with us, we haven't reached that group yet, but we have a current project called the Crossover Youth Model. And so when we get in the justice system a youth that has been in foster care or is in foster care, a series of planning meetings have to happen with ACS, and then we are beginning to plan together for how to keep that person out of the system or get that person out of the system, and use some of the ACS resources for that.
But they've aged out now.
So if they've aged out, right, that's what I'm saying, that if they've aged out, we handle probation the same way that, we tend to, what I just said about, growth perspective. We have trained our officers in trauma-informed care because having been through foster care certainly creates a whole, set of traumas and whatnot. So, we try to gather as many resources as we can to be able to, to serve their needs. But it's hard because now they've lost, for better for worse, the support system that ACS could have given them or gave them. And so we do have a lot of resources ourselves to be able to help those young people. In terms of the domestic violence, like I said before, that's one of my upcoming projects and my upcoming work, because I agree with you. We have, if it were up to me, and we're going to try to figure out how to do it, everybody before, quote unquote, graduating from probation, they would need to take some prerequisite classes or prerequisite things of like developing healthy relationships with others, nonviolent, healthy relationship with others, being able to manage conflict nonviolently, right? If we could do those two things are at the crux of a lot of crime that we don't need to continue seeing, right? So that's definitely part of the work that we'll be doing.
Putting
I wish I could have an
families
answer
together.
for you, but I don't.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, for being here. My question is from where you sit as a commissioner, what differences do you see in your middle-level managers between male and female? If there is any difference that you notice, what suggestions would you give to women in terms of their career development?
So, I wish there was a definitive answer on that one. But it varies. It really varies. I have some men who are amazing managers and already leaders and emerging leaders, and some women who are also the same. They don't, I can't generalize about that, right? What I see in my middle managers is a lot of diversity that is not necessarily gender tied right now. But having said that, you do see sometimes that in this type of environment, the women want to or tend to adopt a tough persona, whether they're quote unquote tough or not. And that's not, I think it's because there's a perception that that's what they should be, and we try to no, you don't need to do that. Find yourself. So we're developing those emerging leaders as well. One of the things that I would like to change, except that this is very tied to civil service laws, is that even though there is a majority of female probation officers, there is a majority of male supervising probation officers. So when it comes to take the test for becoming a supervisor, more men take it, right? And then there's these rules about, that you're supposed to hire from a list, and that list is ranked based on just the results of the test. They don't always, capture the management and leadership skills, right? So it's a very complicated process of developing that staff level and ensuring that women are getting their, fair share, if you will, of promotional practices and experiences, right? So that surprised me when I started looking at how are we doing with women, because women are the majority of our probation officers, but they are certainly not the majority of our supervisors, and not even half and half. So that's a big hole that we need to or a gap that we need to look into.
Okay, we'll take one last question.
Hi. Is there someone else that wants to ask? Okay. My question is, how can the community support probation policies and initiatives?
I think that, sort of getting involved. So now we have community offices around the city, right? I think that it's an amazing. We have an amazing series of services, and that they're open to the community. I think that certainly, for in the student body, interning, with probation, looking at for what we're doing, right? Probation can be, we can be a little insular. So I think that's a great question as a reminder for me that we have to, keep engaging the community at large to support the work. But anything that you can do from an advocacy level to really, use probation. I mean, no, not use probation is the largest alternative to incarceration system that exists here. It's not often seen that way. Usually you see the private nonprofits as to be considered the ATIs. But if you think about it, we supervise on any given day 22,000 people on probation. CBOs can't nearly touch that amount of people. The thing is that we do have plenty of people who should not be on probation because the system still has not gone in the adult system to a truly risk-based system where low-risk people do not get probation. And so there is much more room to have people not end up incarcerated and end up on probation if we can have the resources to deal with them, because the higher the risk the person is, and that doesn't mean that the person is risky, it's just their behavior is risky, then the lower the caseload probation officers have. So supporting initiatives like that, if there's legislation, if there's, community activities, et cetera, those are all important ways that we can be supported.
So that wasn't the last question. We have time for a couple more, so keep them coming.
So, here we are.
Good evening, Commissioner. Thank you so much for being here today. Just had a quick question. Is this position where you thought you would always end up, or is there a ways to go before you reach your ultimate goal, and what does that look like?
So it's, repeat that, because I thought you were going one way, but I think you went a different way, so go ahead.
Is this position where you always thought you'd be, or do you have a long ways to go before you go where you want to be? And what does that look like? What are your dreams, Commissioner?
What are my dreams? Okay. I would love to stay in this position for a very long time, okay? Because there's so much work. This work is never going to end, really. And it combines all the best aspects of what I love, So having said that, I sometimes describe myself as the accidental commissioner. So no, I never thought I would be in this position in my life. I don't even know where I thought I would be, because like I said, I kept making decisions based on sort of the things that I felt passionate about, and I felt, and so when the opportunity to come here, to come to probation 7 years ago, because I started as the deputy commissioner for juvenile operations, came up, I was like thrilled, and I would have done that for the rest of my life too, And then the opportunity to become commissioner came up, and initially I was like, no, I don't like adults. I don't like grown people. I like the young people. No offense to anybody here, including myself, because I'm an older person. But I realized that was kind of a little bit of a cop-out, that it was intimidating, that it was like, what if you can't, like this is a huge agency, not as big as others, but, and so that's where my support system and my network came in, and it's like, no, you gotta do this, you gotta try this, and thank God they did, because this has been an amazing experience. So I can go in so many different directions. I know I won't do consulting because I'm not disciplined enough. to do what it takes to do that. So I always know that I'll be employed in some organization in some way. But as I've told some people at probation, if somehow I lose my job for all the political reasons that you may, lose it, and they want to rehire me as a trainer, I'll take that job. So I don't think of it as a linear thing. It's, again, like, what do I love to do? I love to be engaged with people and teaching and learning and that kind of stuff. So, and the training unit we have is awesome. So I do that. Because I'll be of an age that maybe I can manage that financially. But, so that's kind of how I would see the future.
So, thank you, Commissioner. My question relates to the politics that you just mentioned. I was wondering how much of your time is spent on policy versus politics and also issues of budget.
I have the best budget people ever. So I rarely deal with budget, quite honestly. They just bring me the stuff when I need to weigh in on something. But so those folks deal with OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, on their own. They keep us afloat. They, all that. It does happen that every so often this administration hasn't done it in a while. I don't know if we're going to get hit in this round of budget negotiations. But sometimes you get asked to cut your budget, and our budget's not that big. So we have always tried to do it, and we have managed to, thank God, for the time that I've been there, to manage without layoffs. But that is a very big concern, always. It's always looming there. In terms of politics versus policy, between those two, I spent a lot more time on policy issues, internal policy issues, and politics. I've been able to stay away from that by choice in many ways. And it's not, thinking about what we generally believe is like politics, that kind of scheming or this or that. This administration is not like that at all. We are actually being asked to and been reinforced to work together across the agencies, and there's a lot of cross-agency work that's going on. That's really great. Still could improve, as always. Anything can improve, but that's been really refreshing. And so yeah, I think that would be the balance of things.
Okay, now it really is time for the last question.
Good evening, Commissioner. My question is, what is your stance or thought of the mass incarceration that's happening across America since the Clinton Foundation? And what do you think would be a good way to deal with bias targeting when enforcing the law? Bias, what would you think would be a good way of dealing with bias targeting when enforcing the law out on the streets? A good recommendation for the police officers.
Well, that's a topic for a whole other panel. No, in terms of mass incarceration, we gotta stop that. I mean, there's many ways that we could go about doing it. New York has done a fairly good job of that, actually, and we have great advocates like Glenn Martin with Justice Leadership and others who are really, paving the way for, putting the pressure, the political pressure that needs to happen to be able to reduce that. We've done an amazing job of that in the juvenile justice field already, and I hope that Raise the Age doesn't undo that, because then people are going to be acting based on preconceived notions of what a 16 or 17-year-old in the justice system looks like. But in terms of policing, that's a long answer. The best answer with that is certainly all the implicit bias training that needs to get done within police departments, really moving to a community policing structure, a true and authentic, back to the authentic word, community policing option, so that people can regain the trust of what police officers are supposed to do in your community and for your youth and for prevention and et cetera. So that would be the most direct way of saying that, but I know it's not comprehensive enough. Yep.
No, just if you have some closing comments.
No, I'm good. It's been great questions. It's been wonderful talking to you all, and you know, my contact information you'll have, so if anybody wants to do a follow-up, I'd be happy to do it.
Great. Thank you.
I'm Mindy Boxstein. I am the Executive Director for External Affairs here at John Jay. I just want to thank you all for coming out tonight, for the faculty members for bringing their classes. I think this was a very informing and enlightening and inspirational conversation, and I certainly want to thank Commissioner Bermudez and her staff who have been so responsive, and also they hire John Jay alumni and also have interns in the department, so they're really very supportive of all of you and your peers. And I certainly also want to thank the women in the public sector, the program, and the faculty for their contributions for this evening. Please enjoy some refreshments. We have a little token of appreciation for you within ethics guidelines, not to worry. So I wish you all a good evening, and thank you, and be on the lookout for more programming between the different programs. Thank you.